In Section 4, we will discuss special processes and allergens in regards to food service. The first of these special processes is the HACCP plan. HACCP, or Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points plans, are a safety management system based on the idea that if significant biological, chemical, or physical hazards are identified at specific points within a product's flow through an operation, they can be prevented, eliminated, or reduced to safe levels. An effective HACCP system must be based on a written plan that is specific to each facility's menu, customers, equipment, processes, and operations. HACCP plans are based on 7 basic principles that we will discuss. The first principle of HACCP is to conduct a hazard analysis. The second principle is to determine the critical control points, or points in the process where identified hazards can be prevented, eliminated, or reduced to safe levels. The third principle is to establish critical limits. The fourth principle is to establish monitoring procedures, followed by Principle 5, identifying corrective actions, then Principle 6, verifying that the system works, and finally Principle 7, establishing procedures for record keeping and documentation. To put this in general terms, Principles 1 and 2 help to identify and evaluate your hazards. Principles 3, 4, and 5 help establish how to control the hazards. Principles 6 and 7 help maintain both the HACCP plan and the system and verify their effectiveness. A brief example of how the 7 principles of how HACCP works can be demonstrated using the cooking process of raw chicken. Principle 1 is to conduct a hazard analysis. For chicken, the hazard would be the potential for pathogens that can cause foodborne illness. Principle 2 deals with critical control points. So, in this case, it will be cooking for the destruction of the potentially hazardous pathogens. Principle 3 deals with the critical limits, which are defined in the food code. So we would need to cook the chicken to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Principle 4 asks us to establish monitoring procedures. So, we can use a properly calibrated thermometer to ensure that we reach the appropriate internal temperature. Principle 5 asks us to identify corrective actions. For this principle, we can take the internal temperature of our chicken, and if it has not reached its necessary internal temperature, then the corrective action is to continue cooking it until we reach 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Principle 6 is verifying that the system works. This can be done by monitoring employees and actions to ensure that hazards are controlled. And finally, Principle 7, establishing procedures for record keeping and documentation. This could be keeping temperature logs, food supplier records, food receipts, cook temperatures, corrective action logs, and similar documents. Now that we have a clear understanding of what a HACCP plan is, we need to talk about when you will need to obtain a HACCP plan. First, the HACCP plan should be obtained before you engage in any activity that requires a HACCP plan. The first step for your HACCP plan is for the permit holder of the food establishment to submit in writing the properly prepared HACCP plan to the regulatory authority for approval. You need to have a HACCP plan in place if it is required by law, if a variance is required, if the regulatory authority determines that a food preparation or processing method requires a variance based on plan submittal, inspection finding, or variance request, before engaging in reduced oxygen packaging, including vacuum packaging and sealing, and finally, if a juice is packaged in a food establishment. In order to perform any kind of special process for food, you must have a variance. A variance is a written document issued by the regulatory authority that authorizes a modification or waiver of one or more requirements of the food code if a health hazard or nuisance will not result from the modification. Food establishments must obtain a variance from their regulatory authority before they smoke foods as a method of food preservation rather than as a method for flavor enhancement, cure food, use food additives, or adding components such as vinegar as a method of food preservation rather than as a method of flavor enhancement, or to render the food so it is not TCS. Use reduced oxygen packaging, operate a molluscan shellfish life support system display tank used to store or display shellfish that are offered for human consumption, custom process animals that are for personal use as food and not for sale or service, prepare food by another method that is determined by the regulatory authority to require a variance, or sprouting seeds or beans. Special processes must also be considered when you serve highly susceptible populations. Highly susceptible populations have a few different standards for food service. For the purpose of this section only, and related to juices, children who are 9 or less and receive food in a school are considered highly susceptible populations. All foods, such as juices and eggs, must be pasteurized, and raw foods such as raw fish, raw shellfish, raw eggs or soft-cooked eggs, and raw seed sprouts are prohibited. The reservice of foods is also prohibited. Prohibiting reservice food mainly applies to those in medical isolation or quarantine. An example of reservice may be that an open package of crackers may not be served after the initial meal when the package was opened. As we previously mentioned, highly susceptible populations have different standards for certain foods. Eggs are an example of this. Eggs must be pasteurized when prepared for groups, or when they are made to order if they are undercooked, such as over easy or sunny side up. Pasteurized eggs must also be used for Caesar salad, hollandaise sauce, mayonnaise, meringue, eggnog, ice cream, and egg-fortified beverages. Raw eggs may be served if they are fully cooked, meaning that they reach an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit and are served to an individual. Raw eggs may be used as an ingredient to be cooked. The process of pulling eggs for highly susceptible populations also has special requirements. Pasteurized eggs are required when more than one egg is broken and the eggs are combined, such as in scrambled eggs. Raw eggs are allowed if they are combined immediately before cooking for one consumer's serving at a single meal and cooked to 145 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. An example of this may be an omelet. Raw eggs are also allowed if they are combined as an ingredient immediately before baking and the eggs are thoroughly cooked to a ready-to-eat form, such as a cake, muffin, or bread. Pooling eggs is also allowed if the preparation of the food is conducted under a HACCP plan. Some foods and food processes require a warning or acknowledgement. A consumer advisory is an example of this. A consumer advisory must be posted when there will be consumption of an animal food that is raw, undercooked, or not otherwise processed to eliminate pathogens. Foods that fall under this description include beef, fish, lamb, pork, poultry, shellfish, and eggs. The consumer advisory should be posted in an area of the food establishment that is easy to see and must also be listed on the food menu. Foods that the advisory can apply to shall also be noted with an asterisk or symbol. The second part of Section 4 is food allergens. Food allergens affect 32 million Americans, including 5.6 million children. A food allergy is the body's negative reaction to a particular food protein. Allergic reactions may occur immediately after a food is eaten or several hours later and may include symptoms such as itching in and around the mouth, face, or scalp, tightening of the throat, wheezing or shortness of breath, hives, swelling of the face, eyes, hands or feet, gastrointestinal symptoms such as abdominal cramps, vomiting, or diarrhea, and loss of consciousness or even death. While there are many foods that people can be allergic to, there are some foods that seem to be a more common allergen than others. The 8 most common food allergens are milk and dairy products, eggs and egg products, fish, shellfish, wheat, soy and soy products, peanuts, and tree nuts. There are a few things that your food establishment should be doing in regards to food allergies. Employees of your food establishment should be able to inform customers of menu items that contain these potential allergens. The goal of this is to help customers who have food allergies enjoy a safe meal at your food establishment by being able to fully describe each menu item when asked and be able to list the ingredients in the food dishes. If the food dish is not known to be allergen-free, food employees should tell the customer and urge them to order something else. When you or other food employees are preparing food for a customer with allergies, you should ensure that the food makes no contact with the ingredients that the customer is allergic to. This should also include any cookware, utensils, and tableware. You can also serve menu items as simply as possible to customers with allergies. An example of this may be to serve sauces and garnishes on the side, as they are often the source of an allergic reaction.